But another good reason for defending gay rights is because there are many people in the gay community who have contributed greatly to human progress. And Paul Kurtz knows quite a bit about this. In fact, he's made a whole list of various influential gay people who have contributed greatly to the sciences, the literature, and what have you. And I'd like to discuss one in particular, which would be Bayard Rustin. Now, Bayard Rustin, he had to be in the closet. Now, Bayard Rustin was an architect of the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s in the United States. Most of us know about the civil rights movement through religious leaders such as Martin Luther King, but there were many humanists involved with it as well. Bayard Rustin was the architect of that movement, but he had to stay in the closet, and it was very difficult for him to enjoy his life, and it was very difficult for him to even operate within his circles because he had a great deal of animosity toward him. But without him, there's no telling where the civil rights movement would have been, because though Martin Luther King was the voice of the movement, Bayard Rustin was the architect of the movement. He was a theorist. He was the one who was making a lot of the contacts that Martin Luther King didn't know about, and he was the real boss behind the movement. Some people say Martin Luther King was the leader, but Bayard Rustin was the real boss. So we have a lot of people like this who have contributed greatly to our well-being, who happen to be gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender. And if we try to alienate anyone from these particular groups, it is not in our best interest. It's in our best interest to cultivate relationships with everyone, as long as they're not doing anything to hurt anyone else. And that's one of the main problems I have with homophobia, is that homosexuals don't really do anything to harm anyone else. And I've examined the situation closely. Now, I do understand any other kind of bigotry. For example, I understand bigotry against black people. I understand that there is a lot of animosity, a lot of jealousy, a lot of fear. I understand there's competition for jobs, for education, and things of this nature. It's just as I understand xenophobia and the fear of immigrants. People believe that people coming from other countries might be coming to take their jobs, maybe to intermarry, maybe to dilute their culture. And I understand numerous other forms of bigotry, such as sexism. A lot of men are concerned of having to give up their power. But when it comes to homophobia, I really don't see any threat whatsoever that the lesbians, gays, bisexuals, and transgender persons pose to individuals or societies. So until anyone can come up with one good reason, or not that there's any reason for any type of bigotry, but if anyone could tell me exactly why they are prejudiced against homosexuals, I'd like to understand it, because I think so much of it just goes back to a natural revulsion, cultural conditioning, and religious bias. And I think if you try to get past all that, then it seems to me that there really is no good basis whatsoever, or not even any reason why we could understand why anyone would be opposed to lesbians, gays, bisexuals, and transgender persons. Of course, there are people who claim that it's not natural, but what does that even mean to be natural? And if something is natural, that doesn't necessarily make it good. If something is unnatural, that doesn't necessarily make it bad. And there are a lot of things that we considered to be natural in the past, which, as it turns out, we no longer consider to be unnatural today. For example, oral sex between consenting adults, between men and women, at one time was considered to be unnatural, but I don't hear that argument made today. Or anal sex between men and women at one time was considered to be unnatural. But again, I don't really hear anyone making that comment. And even those who might believe so, they aren't engaged in any type of movement to deny the rights of those who want to engage in those particular sexual practices. However, there are those who claim that homosexuality is unnatural, and for that reason, the rights of homosexuals must be suppressed. And I just don't buy that. I believe that it doesn't matter what you believe. As humanists, you're entitled to that right to believe that homosexuality is unnatural, that it's unethical or immoral. But what we don't believe in is using public policy to force people to come around to your way of thinking. Public policy is for many things, but it's not for trying to enforce individual behaviors, such as what people want to do in the privacy of their own bedrooms. It does come back to the right of privacy, which we respect. And it doesn't mean that everyone has to agree with us, and it doesn't mean that everyone has to even believe that it's an ethical practice. But we do have to respect people's rights, because all of us can engage in behavior that others regard as immoral or unethical. But we wouldn't want anyone trying to use public policy to impose upon us restrictions. We need to be able to give that particular right to everyone else. And so this is how we do what we can to be fair, to be just, and that's the best way to bring about a democratic society. Finally, I'd like to just talk a little bit about what our organization does in Africa. In Africa, we do a lot as far as trying to promote secular humanism as well as skepticism. And we have 6 centers in Africa, and we have 60 different groups in Africa. So this is a notion that's really catching on worldwide. We have people who are writing us all the time from all over the continent, wanting to learn more about our organization, about our publications, and about how they can promote this particular worldview in their particular parts of the world. And one thing about secular humanism, or the history of organized secular humanism and skepticism, is that wherever we have gone, we've always gone in peace, and we have always left in peace. Unlike many religions, for example, those religions such as Christianity and Islam, who took their message to Africa or to America and wiped out entire populations, enslaved entire populations, seized the natural resources of various countries. We've never done anything like that, and we would never do anything like that. And if we did ever do anything like that, I would be the first to rise up in opposition. But what we have done is we've come invited. We have never tried to force our message on anyone. Whenever I've gone to Africa, it's only because they invited me. Whenever I've gone to Latin America, or when we came here to Romania, it's always something that, it's always a matter of invitation. And people are always going to be able to create their own centers